All right, welcome back, everyone. Samir Koster here on episode 15 of Diary of a Sales Engineer. We've got an exciting guest today, Chris Mabry. I'll hand it off to Ryan to introduce him properly.
Yeah, today we are joined with Chris Mabry. He is a pre-sales enthusiast. He is the ex-pre-sales collective general manager and VP of solutions and partnerships at Reprise. Chris has been in the tech space for over 20 years and in pre-sales for over a decade. He's super passionate about the craft of pre-sales, a father of two, and loves the power of community for collectively ensuring we all learn together. So that's the introduction. Chris, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me, Samir and Ryan. It's nice to be on this side of the podcast instead of the other. You pretty much nailed it with experience in pre-sales. After running Pre-Sales Collective, I fell in love with this problem of solving go-to-market challenges. Like I ran pre-sales teams, was a solution engineer. I fell into the career just like all of us, having no clue it existed, having no idea until I literally ran into somebody who was a sales engineer. And I was like, what do you do? I want to do that. That was maybe even 15 years ago now. And since then, went from a few different companies, started leading teams, and just still love this profession just as much as I did the first day.
Can I dive into that a little bit? What makes you still love sales engineering just as much when you originally started?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love the gray area, man. It's like the reason we exist as a profession in general is because we're really, really good at being in that gray area between all these different departments. And I love kind of being that Swiss Army knife. What I say is like in pre-sales, we know more about sales than product, and we know more about product than sales. You can insert that sentence in almost anything in go to market or any real tech company. We know more about marketing than sales and more about sales and marketing. And I've just always really liked living in that area where I'm like connecting people within an organization. I'm landing with value with people. I'm having real conversations with other people, solving their business problems with tech.
And just hearing you say that reminds me of one of the posts Samir had. Samir, do you know the one I'm talking about? The little circles that overlap and connect into the middle of it all. I think just hearing you say it is ultimately what really excites me about the role itself, is that if you're somebody that really loves to learn, then sales engineering is for you, because you do get to learn about marketing, about product, about engineering, about sales, about operations, about customer success, and it just goes on and on and on. I would honestly find that sales engineers would be most eligible to start a company because they have so many different insights into how a business actually runs. And for me, it's something that definitely wakes me up for the role too.
Yeah, I know which diagram you're talking about. Samir kind of came up with it, and then it sort of got like pre-sales viral. And
Yeah.
now I've seen it's at a point where other people are posting it, and Samir's got his little duck, and he's like, "Oh yeah, thanks for that. I remember that." You're 100% right. I think as you grow in your career in pre-sales, you start to decide. I would say within the first couple years, like whether you're going to go down the product route, whether you're going to go down the sales route, whether you're going to go down the management route. Maybe doing demos is just for you, and that's where you want to stay. I would say that you start to carve out this direction in your organization, and that can lead to C-suite. It could lead to founder. It could lead to understanding P&Ls. I really wanted to learn how to run profit and loss statements and get into revenue and all that stuff. Some people just have no interest in that at all, and they want to get into product and learn how to code. It's really, really cool. I mean, it's like a gateway to like an unbelievable career in any direction.
Being in leadership yourself, like I think something our guests would be really interested in learning about, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening today that are an individual contributor, and maybe you're saying to yourself, I don't know what I want to do next. Do I want to go into management? Do I want to go into something more strategic? Do I want to stay an individual contributor? So maybe could you walk us through, how did you approach your career to finding the avenue that you wanted to be at and being in leadership? If you had an individual contributor come to you, how would you help guide them into the right path?
Yeah, man. Well, you know what the saying is? It's lonely at the top, right? One thing about management or leadership is that I didn't understand quite soon enough until it happened, is that it's not all about having the stage. You have to reverse engineer that, because being in leadership, the difference between management and leadership really is the leaders are not the ones on stage at all. They're the ones who are walking around the town square with that proverbial like sign saying, this is what my team is doing. This is what Samir is doing. This is what Ryan's doing. and they're advocating for great work. That to me is like one of the most fun things you can do in leadership is you work with these really incredibly smart people, and you see the work they're doing, and you go out and you advertise that. Now, in my journey, I think I chose that route because influence and making change is something that I'm like sort of addicted to at a company. That's why I've always had like scrappy experience companies, because I like to feel like I'm making a difference at work. I like to drive an organizations forward, whether it's like in sales, marketing, product in some meaningful way. And I thought that that was likely the best way for me to make a real impact. So I was one of those SEs who had a hard time not being able to do that. And that's what drove me to leadership. The second piece is I really love people, and I love helping people succeed. I love helping people connect. I love helping people learn. I love learning myself. And so there was just kind of a natural avenue there.
So I guess, walking through your career and becoming the general manager of Pre-Sales Collective is actually how I first learned about you and listening to you on the Pre-Sales Collective pod. And I always wondered, what does a general manager like do from like a day to day, and like how has the skills that you obtained as a pre-sales professional helped you actually run the Pre-Sales Collective from a GM perspective?
And
Yeah, that's a
just
good
to
question.
chime in there too, before you
Yeah.
get started, because I did get to meet you at one of the happy hours you put on. So I do know that happy hours is included within the general manager position there. So you can hit on that too.
Yeah, that's the moment after all the work's done, right? It's almost like the win wire. That's the happy hour. Getting to the point where the happy hour is planned and scheduled and put off and all that's the hard part. I didn't even know what a general manager did before I got into this role. And I'll say that there was a lot of things that helped me prepare for it, but I'm not sure if really anybody can prepare to be like a general manager of what is kind of understood as like the largest global professional organization for the space you love. Part of me dove into it because I was so passionate and I had the opportunity. What really helped me though, some of the skills were you have to wear a ton of different hats. So as a general manager, you are running the whole business. Essentially, it's like a baby CEO role. I reported to a CEO or an investor, but I was in charge of forecasts. I was in charge of product. I was in charge of marketing. I was in charge of all of what you would call an activation, like how you make a business work or an organization work. And when I had to make calls on the organization's forecast for revenue, for example, they had to be correct. I didn't have a lot of that experience, but luckily at Pre-Sales Collective, there was a lot of help from the board organization to get me to that point. So I was super thirsty for it. I had a lot of experience in go-to-market, running teams, starting teams. Some of that was brand new to me.
Okay, there's two avenues I want to explore here. One is, how did you end up getting the position to be the GM of the Pre-Sales Collective? I think that would be super interesting for the learners. And the second piece of it is, do you think being a sales engineer set you up for success to go and give presentations like that to the board? Because you have this sort of demo excellence that you take with you. And instead of necessarily demonstrating a product, you're just demonstrating slides, but you got to know your information. Did you dry run? Walk us through that first, and then tell us the journey about how you got there.
Yeah, 100% that helped me. Being comfortable on a stage, virtual stage, in-person stage, running conversations, doing discovery, circling back and clearing objections, all of that super helped me because I felt like you could give me any piece of tech right now. You can give me a set of headphones and I could probably be an SE for that company. I applied all those skills. What I was not prepared for, and most people make this mistake first time they do it. The number one rule is you never sell to your board. That's the moment you're not selling at all. That's the moment you're actually kind of underselling yourself. Because what you do, if you go tell them you're going to do great and amazing things, their understanding is that is what is going to happen, and that is not just like the best case scenario, right? We see it on sales forecast calls, right? Somebody will call the best case and then you'll go, yeah, we're not going to hit that best case. But quick learning, as an SE, what's cool is like, we're always learning. So I would say one of the other aspects that helped me was just continuous learning, continuous grinding. I was always looking things up, always reaching out to people for help. And then I got good at it, and over 15 months, we did incredible work there. It's set up for success for many years now. How I got the position is really interesting, actually. And I would recommend this to any of the guests who have an inkling of interest to share what they know. Because first of all, everybody listening, you do have a perspective that's important. And you do have a voice in this profession. And this profession will be glad to have you. We have a really unique group of individuals, almost 1 million strong now globally, that welcome your knowledge, right? I found a spot on the website to submit an idea, and I had an idea for like a presentation. And then I got an email and it became like, hey, Chris, you can speak on a panel. And I became a panelist at a Leadership Next summit, which they still run. And after that, that's what changed everything. I did that speaking engagement and my LinkedIn blew up, and it was like people liked what I had to say. And I was like, oh my God, maybe I've got a thing here, maybe this is good. And then I became an ambassador. So Pre-Sales Collective reached back out to me. I became an ambassador for the organization. And then when the opportunity came, they needed a new general manager. James and Yuji went and started their own businesses. And it was great. They were super, super great about it. They reached out and said, hey, Chris, we love what you've done so far. We'd like to talk to you about this. And my response was like, I never thought I would ever run a community organization. But when I really, really put it all on paper, I was like, there's no way I can't do this. I loved it so much. I was like, I need to go in there and do this work.
That's awesome. One thing that comes to mind is like, you've gone and worked for product companies. You're doing that right now. What's the biggest difference between running like a community-based organization and like a product-based organization?
Man, that's a great question. In some ways, it's exactly the same, but running a community is a level of weight on your shoulders that is unlike or unmatched in running a SaaS company. Failure to perform running a community organization means that people that need that help and count on that organization for community don't have it anymore. And it's just a different level of weight. And being the person who's carrying that weight it feels heavier than I thought. Although I think we did a really great job and the outcome is amazing. Jack's doing an incredible job there. And I'm still very involved in the community. I think the difference was just the feeling that the organization is helping people get jobs. It's helping people do really important life things. On the flip side, though, what's amazing is I was able to take this and apply some of that to a organization who has software. And honestly, the story isn't that different because I still believe that the basic marketing of let me throw some stuff at you and see if you click on it is not the right way to go either. So I think there are some overlapping goals. That I think the number one thing is you always have to be producing stuff that people want to listen to, read, consume, right? You have to be giving value. You have to create great partnerships no matter what. It's just a different level with a community organization.
I think you hit on an interesting point there because we just had another guest on the previous episode, Aiden, who was talking to us about content marketing and ultimately finding the things that the community will resonate with. And it's hard. It is super hard to be able to always stay up to date in creating content that people want to invest their time and energy into, whether it's memes or blogs or posts or learnings or webinars. It is not that easy. And especially when we're talking about a very niche field, there's a lot that we do, but sometimes those takes get recycled and recycled. Like how many times do you talk about storytelling? Well, you can actually talk about it about 1 million times because that's what people are interested in. It's hard to figure out how to create that same engaging story to get people to continue to invest their time, especially in the community itself. And I think that's really one of the most amazing things to me that the Pre-Sales Collective was able to accomplish was building this community of people that not only were bonding over the role itself, but bonding together. Like the amount of people that have supported me in my journey to being a sales engineer, even prior to getting a role, that would get on calls with me and just tell me what they do in their day to day. So as I started interviewing, I could speak to the things that a sales engineer did. So I would get on these interviews and they'd say like, what sort of sales engineering experience do you have? And I'd say, well, here's how my role right now does sales engineering. Like I'll make the leap here and tell you how. And I know everything about what a sales engineer does because I've talked to about 50 different people at this point who tell me what their day-to-day looks like. So I'm ready for the challenge. Yeah. Well, after that first interview, I make it to the second interview because they're like, well, he might not know, he might not have experience, but he sure knows about this role specifically. And I think that just speaks to the community as a whole because they're just people that want to help out. And I'll always say, like, if you have something, reach out to somebody in the community. I can't imagine that many people are just looking at a note and never responding to it on LinkedIn. Like, be an advocate for yourself, right? Just like you did, Chris, where you submitted an idea and everything took off from there. Sometimes all it takes is just submitting a message to somebody on LinkedIn that can also help you take off and flourish in different ways.
That's right. Yeah. One thing you're hitting on there is people will show up and help you and say, oh, Ryan is interested in a 15-minute coffee chat. What they were doing is they were giving you a glimpse into what I would consider what good looks like, in quotes. And when you think of content, like building pre-sales collective content, it's a bear because you're doing something every week you're public, right? Every week you're in front of people. Every week you're doing this. And it's like there is a limit on pre-sales content, but at the same time, I think people are hungry for those examples and people are hungry for human connection. And I apply the same playbook here at Reprise, which is like people still want to know what does a good version of that look like? You know, how did these people configure it this way? How did they configure it that way? How did this individual get the pre-sales job? What is pre-sales for this company versus that company? All those examples are they're incredible. They're like gold.
And I think that was the eye-opening thing for me on the last episode, was not getting in my own head about it, especially when it relates to content, of being like, well, I've already spoke about this thing. Let's try to create something new and novel. You can just tell different stories about the same thing and people are really interested in that. And I'll just come back to your point earlier. Like, if you have something to say, your voice does matter. Like, we will welcome you with open arms on what you have to say on LinkedIn or other forums about this role, because everyone's job looks a little bit different, even though we have the same and or similar titles. You know, like what a sales engineer looks like at one company is totally different than somebody else. And so I would definitely encourage anybody to just start getting your voice out there.
This is something that it ties a few threads together. One was getting into management. To take us back a few questions, one thing I had to become okay with was not everybody's going to like what you do, right? And you're going to have to make decisions that are going to be unpopular. And I am a people pleaser, so I like making sure people feel good, right? I had to get real comfortable real quick with making decisions that weren't going to please everybody, and actually were not going to be very popular in some ways. It's the same goes to content. I think a lot of people hit this barrier and they think, if I say XYZ thing about pre-sales, first of all, who am I? I don't know as much as Chris. I don't know as much as Samir or Ryan. Maybe they're going to comment on it and they're going to call me out. But I'll tell you, the most engaging posts that I put up are pretty spicy and controversial, because people are going to be like, no, you're wrong. I think you should have done it this way. But I'm at a point in my life where I really welcome that. I love it when people tell me that they have a different opinion. You take that 10 years back, I would not have been as open to that. Right. And so I would encourage anybody who's listening to, like, you're never going to make everyone happy. And if you have a strong opinion about something, likely that's the actual thing that makes you special. Mm-hmm. It's the one thing that sets you apart. So you should probably go ahead and double down on that, unless it's, crazy. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think that getting rid of that need to make others feel comfortable or happy with you really does set you apart. It sets you free. That was a big part of my journey, getting into leadership and then running a community, because I guarantee you, imagine how many people had opinions on what I was doing, right? There's a lot of them. There's 50,000 people there, right?
Yeah.
But like, if you have a North Star and you stay true to your compass and you know it's good for the health of the organization, yourself, and others, you just have to keep going.
Yeah, I love that. I think the contrarian viewpoints are the ones that actually will drive this industry forward, because it gets people to like shift their thinking. And just because we've been doing it this way for forever doesn't mean it's like the right way to do it. And sometimes the newest eyeballs that come in, the newest minds come in, shake things up, and you're like, oh, I never thought that we could approach that scenario in a completely different fashion, and that might even work better. So I love the contrarian. I think spicy LinkedIn posts are the most fun too, personally. If there's something that, sometimes on LinkedIn you see, especially if, we're kind of in our own little echo chamber of the SC content creators, you like see something that starts trending and you're like, I don't really agree with that. And then you post something kind of opposite to it and start that dialogue. And I think that conversation is actually really good for our industry, especially like trying to figure out where it's going. And like, how do we want to shape it going forward? which kind of ties me to my next question. Now you are leading solutions and partnerships. Personally, I've never seen those two under the same umbrella. Could you walk us through the rationale behind that, and how's that experience of tying those two things together?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's even more than that. So all titles, this running the pre-sales team was a natural fit. We sell in the enterprise. We have enterprise solution engineers. I'm super passionate about it. Pre-sales. It was obviously a great match. On the partnership aspect, it's one thing that I did at Pre-Sales Collective was design an incredible partnership program. And so it made a lot of sense as well to bring my expertise to their partner program and create one. Beyond that, what I would say, what I'm hyper focused on is I take it way, way higher than just those two things. Because if you think of partnerships and you think of solutions or pre-sales solution engineering, that actually affects marketing, it affects sales, it affects the entire business. What we're really driving is inbound customer acquisition costs, the story that we're telling, the position in the market. So actually what I drive towards is how do I affect inbound? How do I affect pipe? How do I affect customer acquisition cost through all of these different channels and people and activations? So the way I'm actually guiding myself is if I'm lowering the customer acquisition cost of the business, that means I'm doing my job. If I'm increasing pipeline, that means I'm doing my job. We're doing that in a way that's more organic, right? I want to create great content. I want to create great relationships, great partnerships. So what I would say is solutions and partnership makes sense if you think of the KPI of pipeline, customer acquisition costs, and others. I'm also really excited to add clarity to the industry too, because there's a few people, I think there's just a lot of noise around tech and pre-sales. And I think of it like a great toolkit. So I'm using my experience to try to tell that story to make sure people understand what it is this tech does versus the others.
And can you elaborate on what makes a traditional net new SE different than the SE on the partnership team? I think you and Samir have some great insight into why that is different than just being a sales engineer looking for new business.
So to be clear, I have one SE team that's a part of a new business team, and I'm running all the partnerships. Okay. So I do not actually have a vertical of partnerships or what we would traditionally call a channel play model. Now I actually worked in the channel for 4 years, the MSP channel, and I know a lot about B2B sales within channels and partnership programs. Even back, oh man, you're taking me way back. My first SE job, we had VARs and we worked with CDWs of the world, and there's big partnership relationships there. What I'm doing at Reprise is more I'm managing the partnership between Reprise and Pre-Sales Collective, managing the partnership with Reprise and Product Marketing Alliance. So what I'm doing is I'm basically trying to get ahead of all the story we're telling across these communities and other partnerships, and I'm making sure that it's relevant and correct and that it makes sense.
Very cool. That's a different approach on it. And I think your experience having worked in the communities helps you probably stand out in different ways because you have a different mindset of looking at it. I can't tell you how many times it would really bother me. I'd go to these marketing events all over the place and you walk by booths in similar industries and they have the exact same phrases of marketing happening all across, right? This reimagined, this re-envisioned. And it's I'm looking at all the same things. If I am a buyer of this particular software, how do I ever decide who is actually telling the real story? So it makes it, tough for the buyer to figure it out. But when you can step into the market and you can help differentiate the story and get people to engage with that, it helps actually elevate you and the company in a different way. So I think it's just a different way of looking at it.
Yeah, well, we've ran into the problem where I actually really love marketing, but most of the marketing teams have never done the job or the day in the life to the individuals, the ICP they're selling into. And so it's actually not their fault. They may be great at marketing, but not having lived the life or the day in the shoes puts them in a disadvantage where they're trying to understand how to stand out or include themselves in the categorization of the thing. So you've seen in pre-sales, there's been this big sort of internal battle on categorizing tech. I'm sure, Samir, you've seen it in your role where it's like, well, what category is this tech company in pre-sales? A lot of that has to do with the fact that people are focused on the marketing side of it. So they're using the same words to include themselves in the RFPs or the Google searches to get them in the door, right? I think that, yeah, that approach is just confusing everybody.
Yeah, trying to get those proper search words and the search engine, the echo game is like that. I think that helps from search perspective, but it really confuses buyers because everyone's using the same phrases, but it's like we are different. We do different things and are like good at different things. From running multiple pre-sales organizations, as someone who might want to step into a management leadership role, what is like one thing that you noticed when you made the transition from an IC to a manager / leader? I know you touched on, being the voice of the team, but like, what was the hardest thing for you to like try and pick up and reimagine, almost like you have to like rebuild yourself to be in that management role?
Well, I think that I think it shouldn't be that hard because if you are getting into management, you've likely been working on that brand for quite a while. I think that the transition into management for myself was quite easy because for 2 years I had been working as a lead and working as somebody who was positioning the company in a way that a manager would. And I would say that's likely one of the biggest shifts for people who are ICs today who want to get into management role. And one of my eye-opening things when I became a manager is you could just start doing it now. You don't have to wait. As if anything, as an IC, you have probably more power than the managers do. When you start managing a team, you start to realize like you don't have that much power, and there's not a lot like helping you out there, right? And as an IC, you have the ability to go and do pretty much anything you want. So step one, start building your brand now. Don't wait for any permission. You don't need permission to start doing that. Step two, you have a lot of influence in the organization as an individual contributor, and in some ways more influence and in other ways less. But just because you're not managing people doesn't mean you can't make change in an org. I think actually great individual contributors are making changes all the time.
I wanted to actually double click. You said you started, positioning the company as a manager would. What does that mean?
So when you're making decisions in management, well, I would say one of the biggest transitions is you become an agent of the business more when you are a manager than an individual contributor. Meaning you have to look at a team. Let's say you have a team of 5 people and you have to think, how am I affecting the business outcome of the business that I work in within my team, within my activations or what I'm doing, right? And let's just say there's a big transition that comes in from the board and they say, this is something that a lot of us went through the past couple of years. We're going to get rid of Slack and we're going to implement Teams because Teams is free. And I was like, I don't want to get rid of Slack. It's the best thing in the world, right? But as a manager, you have to think of it as, okay, we are saving the business XYZ costs. What would I do with that? What would I do with that money? Or what are we going to do elsewhere? Or how are we going to forecast this change in the business? And when you look at it from that perspective, like from the profit and loss statement, you go, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. That's not a cheap tool, and it's going to really affect our bottom line when it comes to that one line item of tools and software that we purchase. We should switch over to Teams. But as an individual contributor, you're like, I'm not even thinking about that. I'm just thinking about how do I get a hold of my salespeople and how do I collaborate? Because I'm trying to get deals done.
I think there's like 2 amazing things to look at here too, because putting yourself into the shoes of your manager or into leadership allows you to start thinking about things differently. As an individual contributor, you're focused on like, all right, just generate the new business, get a sale in the door. But you have to start thinking and positioning it as a manager. Like maybe this prospect is asking for new functionality. So if you're in the position of management, would you prioritize the feature requests to bring them in? Well, if the deal's worth a lot of money, sure, maybe. If the deal's not worth a lot of money, then maybe it's actually better for us at the organization right now today to pass on this and get a new customer in that actually just fits what we're trying to do versus rebuild something that takes away from our core mission. So I do think those are things that you can be doing as an individual contributor, especially if you see yourself climbing into leadership. And I think if you can put yourself in that position to always be thinking about what's going to be best for the business, right? On the example of Teams versus Slack, it saves money. So if it saves money, what does that mean to me? What can I do with the additional money? Maybe I can go build that additional feature request and bring a new customer in the door. Well, that would mean a lot to us. That would mean a lot to the board. Now, imagine you take that same mentality and you start applying it to the prospects you're working with. Okay, if I'm selling to them and there isn't that cost savings, why, if I was in their position, want to buy this thing? I have to create the value to the prospect and understand that for them, there has to be a reason as to why I'm going to, if I were in their shoes and I bought this tool and it could save them X amount of money or it could provide X amount of efficiency, well, then what would they do with that time? Maybe that's a question I would ask them. Hey, if you were to have X amount of time back in your day or have X amount of value back in a given year, what would you do with it? Well, you know what? I would actually hire 3 more people. If I hired 3 more sales reps, we'd actually likely smash our quota next year. Well, then sounds like a pretty good product for you to buy, right? So I think as an individual contributor, if you can get your mindset that way, it helps you attain leadership roles, but it also helps you sell more effectively because you're thinking about the value at the end of the day. As a leader, what kind of value do I need to even buy software? As a leader, what kind of value do I need to make critical decisions like taking free teams over paying for Slack? I love Slack. But free means free. And if I think that amount of value can help me in the business, then we probably should go the free route. If I don't, then maybe I need to push back, dig my heels in the sand and say, look, without Slack, we are going to be so much less efficient. Here's how less efficient we are going to be. And then I make the pitch on the value of why we need to keep it. And I think that's like when you're in leadership, what you're focused on.
That's right. It's really one of the biggest differences. I mean, even just today, I was on a call with a prospect and I literally asked them, they were like, yeah, with this, they were telling me with this tool, we would save a ton of time and efficiency. But I was like, but you've been demoing software for years without it. So what would that mean to you? And what would saving time even mean? Well, it would give us X. And it was like, I had to just like peel back that onion layer and just like, they were almost selling back to me and it wasn't even good enough for me because I'm looking at it from because I've ran a business before and I'm like, I don't know, that's not strong enough for me, you know? And so I'm almost approaching my prospects that way. And I'm like, that still doesn't tell me the whole story. And once they got into, oh yeah, well, if we actually saved that time, we would do X with it. I was like, oh, you want to be more creative. And they were like, yeah, we're actually here to do, that's what our department's for. And I said, oh, so you're actually not meeting your fulfillment of being a creative department. That's way different than where we spend tons of time in these widgets. It was like, how do we build creativity back into your work stream? And that's a totally different level of conversation.
Doesn't it change the sale too? Like, doesn't it just change the way you even approach and think about the sale? Is when you're thinking about like, yeah, we'll save time. Okay. Yeah, you're thinking in leader, like, I don't know, it's probably just not enough for me.
Not
You
enough.
eventually find out what the actual challenge is, and you're like, oh, wait, actually, they are legit buyers of this thing. I think the best salespeople do that aspect of it.
They
They don't
it
just
well.
take it at face value and say, that's enough to push this forward. I think the people that struggle get into that mindset of like, yep, that's enough. They want it. I heard it. I got the happy ears. They love this thing. Like, actually, we got to dive 1 level deeper or 2 levels deeper. I always think about like the amount of value we can provide and trying to bucket it off. Like, is that level 1 value? Is that level 2? Or is that level 3 value? If we're hitting on level 3 value where I'm finding out they're not being creative enough, I'm going to feel very confident going in and forecasting a deal with my rep. And they're going to say, hey, I think we're going to close this. As their SE, I'll actually chime in and say, you know what? I'm feeling very confident about this as well. We heard from them X, Y, and Z. Meaning, as long as we can come to a commercial agreement, I really think that this thing will go through. Versus when I get the level 1 value, we could save time. I'm probably not going to stand up and say I really buy into it. I'll probably say, yeah, I think there's a chance.
So I know we want to be, respective of your time, Chris. You've been here with us. Any, last, closing statements to leave with the audience?
Man, I can go on forever. Look, I think there's a couple things. One is there's a concept of being on the same side of the table as somebody else. Let me walk you through this. So in a deal or in a management meeting or anything, there's this moment where you have to maybe remind somebody that you're on their team, that you have their best interest in mind. And you can apply this to an interview process. You can apply this to a personal relationship. You can apply it to a relationship with your brother or sister. Sometimes you have to remind them that you're on their team. You want what's best for them. You want what's best You want the best outcome for everyone. Now, as somebody who's breaking into being a solution engineer, understanding in the interview process that that person on the other side of it is also having to make a lot of decisions. They're having a lot of conversations. They're also busy. Learn about what makes them successful and say things like, Ryan, what is your time frame on closing this deal or closing this rec? What's success to look like to you? What kind of person do you want in the business? Make it about the other person on the other side of the table. And in management, if you're coming and you're butting heads, right? And there's just some relationships that don't work as well. The moment they understand that you are on their side, a lot of that goes away. And you can physically feel it when that happens. If you know what I'm talking about, you've been there before, and you're like, wait a minute, we are on the same page. And I would recommend everybody to try to find that route in their life, in their profession. Being a great solution engineer is understanding whether you're on the right side of the table or not, and making that shift to be on the same side of the table so you're both driving towards the same outcome. And that outcome can't be a piece of tech, a feature, a function, speeds and feeds. That outcome has to be much greater than that. It has to be real value to these people's lives and their businesses. Once you can do that, you create great partnerships, you create great relationships, and you can kind of do anything you want from there. Without that, there's a little bit of a mistrust happening. There's a little bit of a back and forth, and you'll never really go as far as you want. I would say always be on the lookout for that. And if you have the intuition, you'll feel the difference when you make the switch. If you picture yourself standing up from a picnic table, go on the other side and sit down, it feels different. That to me is like one of the more powerful things you can do.
And one tip I'll give out there, something that I've done in my career, is at times as an SC, I might have to tell my rep, hey, we don't offer this piece of functionality. We got to pull the reins back a bit on this deal or opportunity. I don't think they're going to be a good fit. And immediately when that happens, you and your rep start to kind of butt heads a little bit because they're thinking, hey, this person is working against me. So something I always like to do when I'm talking to my reps is having a very honest and open conversation with them and say, I am here on your side. I am here to support you and help us win. We have to win together. And by doing that, I think it helps really hit on that relationship aspect that you're talking about. And you'll see your relationship flourish with your reps in different ways. So I'll challenge any SE out there right now. If you are butting heads with your rep, schedule 15 or 30 minutes on their calendar. Say, today, we're not talking about work. We're just going to talk about each other. And I want to let you know I'm here to support you. I'm not here to work against you. I'm here to help us win together. Just say those words and see what happens in the relationship. And then hit our lineup and let us know if it worked. And one last thing before you go, because, I talked about the happy hours. Do you have any funny happy hour stories that you can share?
Oh my gosh. Funny happy hour stories. I would say, look, I would love for more people to let loose a little bit in these environments than they do, because sometimes it feels a little too guarded. I would say the funniest moments are like the expectations stuff. So sometimes you'll put up an event and you'll have, 50 people registered to the event, and you assume about a 40% drop rate, and you have a nice little intimate moment. One of the funniest things was when I joined, I had to get on a flight and go to London and Dublin because there were 2 events scheduled, and I was like, okay, these are the 2 ones that I have to go to. I'd never been in front of the group before as the general manager. I go to London, and it's like the biggest event we'd ever had. It was like 135 people in this room. We're packed, and I'm jet lagged, and I'm like immediately with the mic, and I could talk forever. So it was easy, but it was like, oh my God, what has happened to my life? Like 2 days later, I go to Dublin, and we're at this pub, and the registration looks pretty good, and there's like 8 people that show up, and I'm sitting there and it's raining and it's cold, and I'm just like, what are we doing here? And so I'd say the funniest moment, but you know what's so funny about that though is the relationships I made in that small environment are people I still talk to. And so one of my biggest lessons learned was like, you can go to these smash huge events and have so much fun, but it's almost like the more intimate ones are the ones where I had the deeper conversations, and it was like almost more meaningful. And so I don't think there's any like crazy stories. Like nobody's ever really gone too wild at one of these things, which would be, I would almost welcome that more. But like on the flip side, like some of the relationships that I've built have been amazing. They've lasted for years. and far more impactful than I ever thought.
Very cool. Very cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Chris. And if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, I definitely do. He's got a lot of good stuff out there, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right.
Thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Ryan, Samir, keep doing the great work. Keep putting on the platform. Even if you feel like you're not making a difference, you are. So I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate the words of encouragement. We will keep it going.
Keep it going.
That note.
All right. Take care, guys.
Have a great one.
Oh, wow. That was a lot.
Kick us off, man. Like, I feel like, and this is what I like about the way we formed these sort of interviews that we do is the organicness of it all. Like to bounce around the story of becoming a GM and then talking about leadership and diving into partnerships. Like, I think it's just so fun to constantly be exploring all the different avenues or things just that come to our minds as we're on these calls. I just have so many thoughts, and I'll say that one thing that really jumped out to me was the leadership thing. I think maybe if you're watching, you saw me get really passionate about it because I think if you can start doing those things, it shows a level of intuitiveness that is just different. If you can put yourself into the shoes of the buyer, or you can put yourself into the shoes of your manager, and you can think strategically, like these are things that just help elevate your game totally. And don't be afraid to do it. I think I struggle with that a lot, right? I think I sometimes get in my own head a lot about maybe my skill set or the things I should be doing or not doing, or feeling weird if I'm overstepping or understepping. I think I really struggle with that. And I got to get out of my own head. Just like we talked about last week on the content one. I'm my biggest enemy at times, right? But when I'm just doing me, it's so much better. So don't get in your own way. I'm trying to heed my own advice. So this is like me preaching to myself. Basically, I'm looking in the mirror, but I'm actually just looking at Samir. But I know Samir's got my back though, and that's the purpose of having some good friends.
Yeah. I think like throughout that, especially like the leadership part, it kept reminding me back to the conversation that we had with Christina. And like the biggest thing that has stuck with me, and like, Chris even repeated it, was the line she said of there's the difference between working in the business and working on the business. And I think as SE, our job is naturally just to focus on in the business. The day-to-day, I'm trying to get this deal closed. But if you can take a step back and look at how it actually affects the business, to your point, it makes it way better as a seller. And then I like how you took it to the next level of the prospect is going to be thinking this way of, if I go and stick my neck out and ask for $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 for this piece of software, it better be doing something very beneficial for the business at the end of the day. And so being able to shift your mind to like become more broad and get a 30,000-foot view is something I think as like, even for me, I like struggle with, and that's something I'm trying to build upon, because we're so in the trenches day to day, like deal after deal. It almost like we forget that there is a bigger picture there. And I think that's just like a big takeaway, like hearing Chris speak about it and how he is. I think the biggest thing was when he said that you can start thinking like a manager before you become a manager. And like, it's almost like you're manifesting that I want to get into this leadership role. How are these leaderships acting? I'm just going to start acting like that today. So like that was a big insight. And then also like running a community.
It's so cool. Like, it's such a cool perspective of this whole thing, because we think about this a lot, and we are guilty of this on this podcast. Like when we think about sales engineering, we think about sales engineering in the context of selling software.
Mm-hmm.
But there are so many different aspects of this, from the community side, from selling services or selling hardware. Like there are so many different avenues. It's easy for us because that's been what we've done in our career, is sell software, right? But I think about running a community and growing the community and the weight of it all. Like I honestly never once thought about that, but that to me makes so much sense. Like to get to the level where Chris was at to run the pre-sales collective, one, outstanding. But two, think about the level of passion it takes to want to do something like that. And then you feel this weight of like, hey, I have a lot of people relying on me and the content we make. And I think about how it helped me get a career started, right? And it's like, yeah, if we don't have people like you building community like this, then it all, it all kind of withers away. And it makes me think about what we do here is really special too, right? When people reach out and they say, hey, listen, I got so much great insight, or I had somebody reach out the other day and send me notes taking from our call, like that stuff gives me goosebumps, man. Like it is awesome. Honestly, like what a cool guy Chris is. Like, dude, if you have a voice, get your voice out there. Like,
Get
I
it out
love
there.
that sort of mentality. And I don't know. I think about you, Samir, encouraging me to get my voice out there. And, to anyone out there that's hesitant, just do it. Last week talked about just make it, just do it, just go
Just
for
do
it.
it.
Like there's nothing bad that's going to happen. There's no, I don't know, content emergency or like, I guess be careful of the content you post. Maybe he'd
Yeah. I think the scariest thing might be when someone disagrees with your thoughts. And I remember posting things where I got a comment that was like negative leaning. I wouldn't say it's a negative comment, but it was like almost questioning me, and I was like, "Oh wow, this makes me really feel really uncomfortable. Like, I don't like this. Like, why don't they just love it and just hit the like button? Like, why they gotta like challenge me on it?" But I think those are the types of conversations that actually move the needle forward. If everyone is just like yes manning everyone else and like not having thoughtful discussions, we're not going to progress as an industry. And like I really like that Chris really and encourages contrarian beliefs, because that's really what my belief is, that anything that is kind of going against the norm will get people to snap out of the norm, the regular things that we do day to day, and actually really think about maybe there is a better way of doing this. Maybe pre-sales should stay pre-sales and not go the whole customer life cycle. Maybe some of these things should be thought about before.
I'll say that about every organization out there too. Like, the way SEs are demoing the product today, challenge them to think about demoing it differently.
Yeah.
Maybe, if you're in management and you want to just try something new, tell your SE, say, you know what? I've seen your demo 100 times. It's great. I want you to do 5 new moves on the demo or 5 new talk tracks. Like, give me something fresh and authentic, and let's see how it resonates. Because there might be one thing that pops up and you're like, actually, we could be doing this a lot better, but I just haven't pictured myself. And what's happened is we are training new SEs, and the new SEs come on and they're watching gold standard videos and they're parroting it, but in their own words. And we've kind of stuck to this flow, but nobody wants to challenge the flow. Like, do it. Bring yourself. Bring your authentic self. Just like your voice matters, your authentic demo matters too. Like, if you don't feel comfortable in demoing it the way somebody else does, feel free to challenge the status quo, right? And say, I might have something better than this. Try it out. It may suck. That is with everything in life. You try something, it may be awesome, it may be the same, and it may suck, right? It could fall into any of those buckets. But so what if it does suck, right? If it does suck, try something again. Try something again. And then eventually you'll land on something and say, wow, I'm happy I took the chance to try to make this better. And now I have a brand new way of thinking about it or envisioning it. So I don't know. Don't be afraid of the suck.
And honestly, most of the stuff is going to suck. And that's okay.
I've had so many corny jokes just suck. Like, just flat out suck. And I'll say them and I'm like, oh, that was awful. That was terrible, man. Like, and I'll be like kicking myself out of the call. I'm like, oh, dude, man, the comedian in me, that was brutal. But every once in a while, man, like I'll say something and it will be so good. It's like, I'm going to run that back for 50 times over, because every time I say it, people are cracking up. It's awesome. But yeah, look, there's going to be some that fall just like flat on your face bad.
Yeah, and that's just part of the process, and like that's fine. That's the creative process. And honestly, only you're gonna notice it. You tell like a corny joke and nobody picks it up, you just keep going. Nobody knows that.
Just move on. I will say, you say a corny joke, you have 2 options. One, you can address how bad the joke was, and you can say, yeah, that one, not my best. Or you can just move on and act like it never happened. Like, that's
completely ignored.
Yep. Actually, we're right on to the next thing. We're not even going to touch on it. But
We're
hey, you know what? Sometimes embracing your funny moments are also a super relatable thing for people to look at and say, you know what? I really appreciated that when he made that awful, unfunny joke, he just said, hand up, that was me. That was bad. Next time, I promise it will be funnier, because it can't be that bad again. I hope. At least if it is bad, then maybe I'll stop joking.
Yeah. Well, I think with that, we will wrap here. And, as always, keep sending us messages on things to talk about. If there's someone cool you want us to bring on, shoot us a DM. It actually means a lot when people have reached out. Like Ryan said, we got messages of some of the content we're putting out, helping people out. People are taking notes. Like, that was wild. Actually,
That was sick. That was awesome. 10 out of 10.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Like, shout out to you. You know who you are if you're listening. But it means a lot to us that people are listening to this, and we really enjoy doing this. So until next time, this is your boy Samir.
This is your boy Ryan, and
signing
that
off.
does it for this episode. Thank you, Chris.